Okay, everybody that's here today. We're here for the DRC Drone Racing Club of Atlanta's RTF workshop. Now, RTF stands for Ready to Fly. This first workshop, we actually have two workshops today. We have this RTF one, and then we have a DIY one. Well, RTF one is really about ready to fly work quadcopters, and that is the absolute basic. If you were to start with a quadcopter today, what would you buy and where would you start? You know, and how would you actually fly a quadcopter? You know, what makes it fly? That kind of stuff. So that's the first workshop, and then the second workshop deals more with building. You know, what does a motor do, and it goes much deeper into what the technology is and what it does. Oh, you can. Sorry about that. Mr. Mad Labs, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. We have my helper over here from Mad Labs. So,
Don Miller, founder of Mad Lab Industries. We're UAV manufacturer out of Chicago that deals mainly in commercial applications. So we do a lot of pretty cool things with drones that a lot of us never thought were possible. And we've been doing a little bit with the mini racers for a little while.
So, yep, and myself, my name is Vivian van Sale, and I'm known as Funfly FPV on all the forums, and you'll see a lot of my videos and stuff on YouTube. And I'm very involved. I'm a director also in the DRC, which is an Atlanta-based club, which meets every 2 weeks. So our agenda ready to talk about what is FPV, and then we're going to go what is this session, this specific session about, and then what is a multirotor, and then we're going to go into learning to fly, and that's where and what to buy, where to fly safely, flying a multirotor. We're going to go through the basics of it, and then we're going to go through FPV, and that's the hot topic nowadays. Everybody talks about FPV. We're going to go through what's FPV and FPV Racing, ultimately, and that's, you'll see we have a course set up across the street here, and that's our FPV Racing course. Although it's been raining, you'll see I'm muddy. It's just too muddy out there, so the people are actually racing inside the garage over there. So, and here you'll actually see a little picture. In front here, you'll see the side of a gate and a flag in the back. This was at Georgia Metropolitan University, where we were having a race a couple of weeks ago. And this is an example of a race course in the background there. So, first of all, who we are, DRC, like I say, we're a club. We haven't been established that long, probably from May this year. We have about 50 to 100 members at the moment. We meet every second week. Please join us. Join us on onedrc.com is our website. We have some pamphlets which I'll hand out. And here's some affiliates of ours. Of course, we deal with Mad Labs, which is here today. And then we have this site, which is called fpvlive.tv, and that's where we will be live streaming the race. You can actually go in there right now. I think they're racing at the moment, and you'll be able to see them racing live in the parking garage over there. That's fpvlive.tv, and then a few other places is our DRC, our Drone Racing Club, and there is onedrc.com. I'm sorry you can't see that properly on there, but it's onedrc.com. There you go, www.onedrc.com, and that's our club, our specific club. And then Mad Labs themselves, of course, you can find them on the internet. Is it madlabs.com or what's your website? madlabindustries.com. And they, we'll show some of their technology here today. So that's who we are and what is the DRC. DRC, again, like I said, is a club, and there's many facets to it. So let's move into what is FPV. So, you know, before I start speaking a lot about FPV, you need to understand what FPV is. And FPV really is first person view is what it stands for. And that is you viewing out the camera of a quadcopter like this one. There's a camera on this quadcopter. You'll see there it is. And you're live viewing that on a little monitor like this or a goggles, and we'll show a little bit of that a little bit later on. But that's what FPV is, and it is it brings together a whole lot of technologies like, you know, live video, remote control, microcontrollers, and a whole array of sensors, which we'll cover more in the next course. But and it brings all of that together, and it creates a flying drone like this that you can fly close proximity. You know, there's a lot of airplanes and stuff, but with this drone I can actually fly around inside here, no problem. I can go under chairs, I can fly, and I can see where I'm going with this. And it's this big, and that's called close proximity. There's nothing really out there that does close proximity like we can with these toys. You know, military has drones, but those drones are huge airplanes that fly in the sky. We do much closer, and that's why we're involved with things like search and rescue, where we can actually fly into a house, fly around inside the house, and give you live video from there, which you know, very few other things can do at this time. So close proximity, we hardly ever go over 100 feet. We try and stay as low as we can, you know, if we're racing specifically a course, and we try and avoid obstacles, and we view it through our monitor. So that's the basic idea, but what it really comes down is you are flying this thing as if you were the pilot and you were inside of it, and that's FPV. So when you fly this and you see the output from there is as if you're inside this little quadcopter, or and you're actually flying. So that's the main idea behind it. So, moving along. There specifically, what are we going to learn in this session? We're going to learn about multirotors and flying them, and this again is the very basic course, and we're going to talk about safety of these things too. What does the law say, and what's the safety about? You have your 250 there, right? If you can borrow me a 250, I might need that to show. So, so there's many types of multirotors today. Quadcopter being one, and a quadcopter is one because it has 4 motors or 4 propellers. The one at the right top, you'll see, that's this one he's got here, and this one is a quadcopter. And it's a quad because it has 4 motors or 4 propellers. Makes it a quad. In the middle there you'll see a hexacopter. And that one has 6 motors, and that makes it a hexacopter. And there's ones with 8, and those are called octocopters. So this one specifically is by far the most well known, and it's known as a quadcopter. And they come in different sizes. Here you'll see almost a toy-like one. This size is called a 250 size. This size here is more towards a 500.
Yeah, about
450, 500 size. So they come in all shapes and sizes, but what makes them quadcopters is there are 4 motors. So all of these are quadcopters, and all have 4 motors, and all with 6 motors will be known as hexacopters, and 8 octocopters. Okay, so that's basically what they are. Now let's talk about flying. How does the flying thing work? Okay. So first of all, where to buy? Where can you get one of these things? How do you get started? So there's specialty stores like these guys, Mad Labs Industries. They will sell you something like this, and they'll sell it to you ready to fly, RTF, or they'll sell it to you in a kit form. So and you can build it yourself. So typically something like this you can get at Mad Labs. Now there's many other places that sell them today: Fry's, Target, Micro Center. I mean, you can get a quadcopter like this almost anywhere today, but you know, they're more consumer grade, but this is a very good starting quadcopter. You know, this thing I've probably crashed about 200 times and I broke 2 props. This thing you'll crash once and you'll have to rebuild it. You know, a copter like this. Although it's cheap to rebuild, you wouldn't want to start off by flying something like this. You would much rather start off by flying something like this, and that to teach you the basics. But we'll go through that in a few seconds here. So, and then there's of course a whole host of online places you can buy: madlabindustries.com, getfpv.com, hobbyking.com, Amazon, eBay. Everybody sells them now. But hey, what to buy is the question. I mean, you can go onto any one of these sites or walk into Target, you see it there, but what do you want to buy? I mean, and that's the big question then. So what to buy? There's typically the classifications are RTF, ARF, BNF, and DIY. Ready to fly kit is something like this. This was bought as a RTF, ready to fly, and it came like this. I have a quadcopter, a controller, and the little FPV monitor that's inside there. That's a ready to fly kit. Something like this will be, you can buy it and ready to fly, or maybe in a bind and fly, meaning the copter is already built, the only thing you have to add is your radio. So typically you would only buy one radio and you'll have many of these. So in a bind and fly, because you already have a radio, you're just going to put a little receiver in there and you're going to buy many of these and you will just bind them with your radio, and that's a bind and fly. So, but your first one, of course, you don't even have a radio, so you want to start off by maybe a RTF, but be warned that the cheap RTF kits, typically you can't take the radio much further than the absolute basics, right? So, and then it goes all the way up to DIY, where something like this is 3D printed. You can print the stuff. Mad Labs created this one. You can print it, you can completely build it from the ground up, and buy all the little parts, put them together and build it, and that's called the DIY quadcopter. And you really build it all the way from scratch. And of course you can build these. Lots of people buy these and DIY this size. This is a racing quadcopter, and they buy them in kit form and they build them. So that's typically lots of people build in the DIY. But for a beginner, there's so much intricacies inside here. This is not something you want to build when you start off. If this is your first quadcopter, you really want to do what I described down the bottom. You want to go out and spend $30 or $35 and buy something like this with a real cheap radio, and you'll fly it around the living room, and you'll annoy the pets and the other people in the house, and you'll fly from couch to couch. But that will give you an idea of how this thing flies. Forward, backwards, left, right. That's $35. It doesn't have FPV and you can't see anything, but you can get the idea of how does a quadcopter fly. Then you maybe step up to something like the one in the middle, and that's a kit like this. There's many of them. There's a Hudson kit, or there's this one is called what's it called? Ladybug, V2. Yep. And this one comes with FPV, and it has a little monitor. I'll actually show that quickly to you. If I turn this on and I turn the monitor on, just a second there, you will actually see, let's put it on the camera so everybody can see it, you will actually see the output as I move this around. Oh, it's not very clear, is it? Well, let's see if it wants to focus. I don't know if it will focus. No, it's not good. You get the idea. But there's the output on a little monitor. So a kit like this is the second level you can buy. And let me get that. and that is this one in the middle, and this is going to run you about $120 to $150. So $35 for the real cheap one, $120 to $150, and then you're into FPV flying. You can actually fly this thing first person view. And again, what's nice about this one is this one has 200 crashes and it's still going. So you can crash it a lot and there's not too much issue for you on that one. And then the step after that is the one on the right. And now there I've got an immersion RC Vortex. This is its competition right here from Mad Labs. There's many of them, and you can buy them and ready to fly, all the way down to DIY to build them. And this is specifically a racing quadcopter. Now this quadcopter will go at its maximum speed 65 miles an hour, but it's very specialized. So if you can imagine, if you were just starting off, if you were to hit maximum throttle by accident, this thing will hit the roof and it will fall. If you did that with this guy, there'll be holes in the roof, and there are in my living room. My wife doesn't know about it. So, but one day she will find out, because this thing, if you hit throttle on this, it goes 65 miles an hour one direction, you know. So you need to know what you're doing before you get to this. You can actually seriously hurt people. And if you go to something even bigger like this thing has propellers that size, and they spin at, I don't know what the kV is on this, 1120, yeah. They spin quite fast. You don't want to do this near pets or anything like that. So I really strongly suggest starting off with really a toy like this. If you can't hurt anybody, or you're not going to hurt any property, but you're going to learn how to fly, and you can even do it indoors. So that's really where you should start, and then you build up to these bigger guys. And there's a whole path from here, which a little bit bigger than this, a little bit bigger than this, which you still can do inside. But once you get to these guys, you're talking real speciality stuff. Now you're really into the hobby. And there's where the classification also comes. This is called a toy grade. This is called a hobby grade. So once you start with this, you're into the hobby. Here you're still in the toy side of it. But it at least teaches you where you're going with it, right? So where to fly? Where can I fly? Like I just said, the small one, you can fly it in your living room. It's no problem. But there's some obvious things that happen. And I'm not going to talk about the law, because the law is a gray area at this point, and it's a deep hole and nobody wants to go there. It is being formed at the moment. They're still working on the law at the moment. We're expecting out. But there's some obvious things you don't want to do. One thing you can do is you can look at this map box. You can get fpvmap.com or airmap.io. There's a couple of sites or websites that will show to you where it's not safe to fly, and will even drill down to your area, because you do not want to fly in US national parks. You do not want to fly on a military base, and you do not want to fly within 5 miles of a medium to large size airport. So you don't want to do that. If you do that, you will get in trouble. So do not do that. And that's where these maps are really nice. You put in your address and you say, oh, I'm okay. You know. But there's some other obvious things you don't want to do. You don't want to fly over people. I mean, I see at large events people take a thing like this and they fly over the crowd with it, taking video. Well, this thing works on the same frequency as the cell phone, 5.8 gigahertz, and there's 10,000 people below you, each with a signal, and this thing in the air, I don't like it. I mean, I wouldn't do it. You know, if something goes wrong and this thing hits somebody in the crowd, wouldn't be a good idea. So common sense should prevail. Do not fly it over people or near people. If you start out with this in your living room, and then when you go up to these guys, go out in an open field, check the map, go out in an open field, fly it over there until you're confident and you can understand it. And then you work into races and join the club and, you know, that kind of stuff. So there's some other things. You don't want to fly in a FAA-controlled airspace, of course. And that means, and if you do, you have to get approval from them, but At this point, it's impossible to get that. Also, if you fly for commercial purposes, there is a way to get a commercial license to fly this commercially, but do not fly it commercially at this time. You need a special license, meaning if your buddy says, hey, I'll give you $20 to come film my house, it's illegal because you're doing it commercially. You're not allowed to do that. You need a license for that, okay? So, and then the other side is, if you're going to fly, please do not go over 400 feet, because then you're into FAA airspace, and you know, every week there's somebody saying they saw a drone at 6,000 feet. I don't know which drone goes 6,000 feet, but okay. You know, but please stay under 400 feet. At least use common sense. You don't want to go up there. So we don't have that problem in racing drones, because racing drones we really fly. If we go above the treetops, we're too high. I mean, we really stay really low, following a course, going under obstacles that's this high. You know, we don't go 400 feet in the air. So, but with the bigger ones, of course, a quadcopter like that can go 400 feet in the air, but don't do that. Just stay low as much as you can. There's some other laws and stuff being formed, but again, I don't really want to go deeper into that, as I'm not an attorney and I can't really tell you what it is. So the basics of a quadcopter. There's, you know, for the absolute basics, there's a few things that you have to understand. There's of course the propellers, and that's these things. You'll see them. And one thing to understand about the propellers, and a lot of people starting out says the thing doesn't want to take off. I put all the propellers on, it doesn't take off. The thing is, they have a direction too. So this propeller and this propeller typically go clockwise on a quadcopter. They will spin clockwise, and you'll see that the propeller is pitched up this way, and on this one it will go anti-clockwise. So if you install propellers on a quadcopter, it's not just that it has 4 propellers, they have a certain direction too. So understand that. And if your quadcopter, you know, flips over or doesn't want to take off, most likely you've got the propellers the wrong way around. So it's important to understand the propellers. As an absolute beginner now, again, this is the absolute beginner's course. So the next thing you want to look at are the motors, and those things, if you're going to take off and fly, make sure that these spin freely like these ones do. Nothing's catching on them, they're clean, they look in good shape, you know, that kind of thing. Even on a small quadcopter like this, the same thing, you know, prevails. They need to spin freely. They have a direction, and you need to make sure you're okay with that. Then the next thing is your battery. There's many batteries and all shapes and sizes. Here's a miniature battery from a quadcopter. That's from a small copter that I don't even have here. But what's important about these batteries is charging them. And battery charging safety is very important. You don't put this thing on the charger and go on vacation, because this is actually a small little bomb. It's a LiPo battery. If this thing explodes, it creates quite a big fire. You don't want to puncture them. Your battery needs to be in good health, and it needs to be properly charged on a proper charger, meaning you don't just charge this thing on anything. Charge it with a recommended or the actual charger it came with. So in a kit like a ready-to-fly kit, like that one, it will come with the charger, you know, so, and the battery. So in a DIY kit that you build yourself, you're going to have to go buy a charger, you're going to have to buy a battery, and you have to understand what size charger for what size battery, that kind of thing. And again, that's where RTF kit is nice. Everything's already there for you. You just plug in a battery and that's fine. So that's a little bit about batteries. And then the radio. Here's a 4-channel radio. And what that basically just means is this radio can control 4 different things, and in this case it's the throttle, the yaw, a roll, and a pitch. So there's 4 things this radio can control. Bigger radios have little knobs and switches and all sorts of things over here, and then it goes up from a 4-channel, 5-channel, 6-channel. There's 20-channel radios, or 16 and 20-channel radios, and you can use those extra functions to do extra things. You know, some quads have LEDs or lights on them, so you can have a switch on here to turn on the lights or start the camera or do whatever you want. On a small quadcopter like this, it really is only 4 channels. It's forwards, back, throttle, and we'll go through that just now. So radios, again, on a ready-to-fly kit, when you buy it like this, the radio comes with it, and it is a standard 4-channel radio. And it's cheap. This one was $100, $120 for everything. If you go up and you buy a decent radio, a hobby-grade radio, you're talking probably you would want a Tyrannus, which is the most common or widely used one at the moment, and they are about $200, I would say, $200, 170, 200, and then you get a proper. I think it's 16 channels max, 8 times 2, 16 channels on a Tyrannus, and that's a proper hobby-grade radio. And a lot of the people in our club fly Tyrannus. They wouldn't fly something like this because this is only 4 channels, and in a racing quadcopter like this, you wouldn't, you know, you don't just want to go up, down, left, and right. You also want to change your aggressiveness. That could be maybe on a switch and that kind of thing. So, you know, on a copter, people typically they need more channels in racing, is what I'm trying to say. So that's a little bit about the radio. And then the last thing you need is called your FPV gear, and that's the camera. Specifically if you're into racing or FPV flying, the camera part. Hello, sir. You would, and your gear is typically the camera, and I'll put that over here, and that is typically the FPV camera. That's over here on this quadcopter. You'll see the camera stick out the front here. That's called your FPV camera, and that camera is specifically there to view the output on something like this, and those are called FPV goggles. Now, how they typically go is a pilot would put them on, and then inside here is a monitor that to me looks about that size when I look at it through here, and I would basically be cut off from the world around me, and I would just see the output from this little camera in front here is what I'm seeing. So it's as if I was inside of this quadcopter. And again, I'll demo it quickly over here again. And I'm still probably not going to focus like we wanted to. I'm sorry. But yeah, there's the output. I'm sorry it's so blurry. But maybe you can see me there. No, you can't. Maybe you can see you there. Well, in any case, that's what the pilot would see. So also on there, on a quadcopter like that, you can also put a higher definition camera, like this one. This one is a GoPro type camera, and that would mount on top. And with this camera, typically, you'll lots of times see drones go with 2 cameras. That's the FPV camera, the real-time camera. This camera is the high-definition camera that they take video with. Another example of that would be something like this, which is called a run cam. It's a very small, also a 1080p capable camera that really goes in front of a drone like that, sits on that. And it takes a little SD card in there, and when you finish flying, you take it off and you take your SD card and you go look at your footage. And if you go by our tent, you'll see a lot of this kind of footage being shown there. So typically a racing drone, or when you're flying like that, you'll have 2 cameras on. One to do your real-time transmission to your goggles so you know where you are. But with that one, you really, you don't want it to be too high definition, because latency is so important. You know, you can't, if you're going to send that much information, high definition information, via the radio to the display, there's going to be latency, and if you're flying at 65 miles an hour, you do not want to know a second later that there was a tree, you know, so that's not a good idea. So latency is absolutely important. So typically the resolution of this built-in camera is much lower so that you can get the information to you much quicker. That's the technical part of it. So beyond that, let's just quickly look at a multi-rotor like this, and how does it move forward? How does it stay level? We'll talk a little bit about the radio channels, GPS, ranges and fail-safe, and then safety. Safety again. So how does a multicopter like this move forward? So I'm going to try and show this on here. If we were to look at a copter like that, sorry, let me get some of the stuff out of here. So, if we were to look at this quadcopter, how does it move forward? Or let's start by how does it stay level? So inside here, there's actually 4 computers, each for a motor. There's a computer in there, it's called the ESC, and it has a 32-bit processor in there. And then inside the middle here, there's a main processor, and that's called your flight controller. So there's actually 5 computers on this specific quadcopter, and those 5 computers are networked together. So how does it stay level? On this flight controller, there's things called accelerometer, and some have barometers and magnetometers and all sorts of sensors that tells the computer what level and specifically how this quadcopter is oriented. So if you were to take a quadcopter and you just hit throttle when you start off, it would go up into the air and just hang there. How does it do that? How does it just hang in the air? Well, the computer inside senses if let's say the wind tilts the copter slightly to the right. A computer inside would sense that. A sensor would say, hey, I'm leaning to the right, and it will give these 2 far motors the instruction to spin up a little bit more. It will tell those 2 computers, hey, you spin up, and those will lift up, and the quadcopter would be level again. And that's the same way if you're flying. If you're going to tell your radio, you're going to tell the radio, quadcopter, please move forward, and you hit the move forward button, or known as the pitch. The back 2 motors would actually spin up, and the quadcopter would start tilting like this, and that will make it move forward. So if you're on your radio, say, no, go backwards, it would spin up more, or it would give more throttle to the front 2 propellers. Those would lift up higher, and the quadcopter would start moving backwards, and the same for left and right. So there's just 5 computers in here, all networked together, that make that happen for you, and a whole lot of sensors. So that's really how a quadcopter flies. Does that make sense? Does anybody have a question about how it flies? So radio channels, we covered that already, all the channels that there are for this. And let's just quickly talk about GPS. This quadcopter has a thing called a GPS on, and you won't see that, this bigger quadcopter has a GPS on. You won't see that on a small racing drone, because a racing drone we're flying right here in front of us. A bigger guy like this, you can do autonomous flights with. You can tell the controller inside here, well, fly down to the river, turn around 360 degrees, take some video, spend 5 minutes, and fly over here, then point this way, then fly back to me and land. And to do that, it needs a GPS, meaning this quadcopter needs to know where it is in the world for it to execute what you told it. So that's where GPS comes in. Now, typically, on a small copter, on a racing quadcopter like this, we don't have that, because you're into racing. There's very little autonomy around this. It's really you as a pilot looking through a camera flying it. With these bigger ones, You really do not even need a radio. You can take a tablet and you can look at Google Maps. You can go fly here, fly here, fly here, and fly here, and come back and land. Enter, and it will do that. So that's these bigger ones. That's really there, but they're more for filming. You know, a guy who's doing filming will say, go back there and then come back towards me at the X amount of speed, and then focus in on me, and you know, if you're doing filming. So that's where that comes in. In our world of racing quadcopters, we have none of that. So then the next thing that's important is ranges. This guy, you can maybe go a mile or so with it. You wouldn't want to go that far. We don't have racing courses that's a mile away. We have a couple of 100 feet maybe at maximum. So range on that, we don't care. And it's so small, if you were to lose this thing 2 miles down the road, you would never find it. You know, something like this, however, you can go much further. And ranges, and to do it legally, you can go about 30 miles. But the battery on this quadcopter would never last for 30 miles. So that kind of thing is mainly for wings, and if you're flying a little aeroplane. But again, there's legal ramifications. This thing controlled probably also a mile or two, but even this at a half a mile you can probably even see it. But with autonomy, of course, you can send it almost out of range for you. You don't need to physically control it because the computer controls it, right? So, but then that brings us to fail-safe, return to home and return to launch. Again, in a small quadcopter like this, it has no GPS, it has no idea where it is in the world, and if it were to go out of range, typically it would just fall from the sky and fall. That's what this one will do, but you typically don't fly this much further. A cheap one like this that you buy, same thing. If you turn off the controller while it's flying, it will just fall out the sky. Now, a bigger quadcopter like this, where you maybe have a $2,000 DSLR hanging on the bottom, you don't want it to just fall from the sky. And that's where things like fail-safe, return to home and return to launch comes in. Typically on those, they'll even have a button on the controller, or if you were to turn off your controller, this thing will come back home. So it will go to a certain height, it will fly back to where it took off from, and it will land itself, and your camera will be safe. So it's very important to understand that, and of course, again, if this thing's carrying a camera and it's 5 kilograms, you don't want it to just fall out the sky. Who knows what's under him? Something like this, I can throw you with it, nothing's going to happen to you. But with that guy, you need fail-safe. These guys, the racing quadcopters, again, they don't have fails. They might have fail-safe to slow down their descent after you lose communication, but they have no way of coming back to you, typically in a racer quad. So it's very important, the safety part of it. Again, I can't iterate more what we spoke about safety. Don't fly over people. Don't fly over property. Don't, you know, because at any point, like I say, you've got a guy flying this over 10,000 people. Everybody's got a phone on the same frequency, and something goes wrong and he loses connection, and the thing falls from the sky. You know, you don't want that to happen. So set up fail-safe properly. Understand that it's there. If you're going to fly a big rig, make sure that it has return to home and return to launch set so that it will come back home and not just kill somebody. So safety is very important again. So just the absolute basics of flying a quadcopter. I'm just going to go through that quickly. Throttle, that's this. There's 2 modes, well there's I think 4 modes in the world. We in America typically fly mode 2. It means the throttle is on the left. Europe typically fly mode 1, throttle is on the right. We typically here prefer mode 2. And what it means really is, if I push this thing up to the top, the propellers are just going to spin faster and faster. These propellers over here, and let's see if I can show that to you. These little propellers on this quadcopter are just going to spin faster, and it's going to try and take off. So If I add a little battery here, I will try and demonstrate this. Oh. Now it doesn't want to bind, you see? This always happens in demos, right? There it goes. Okay, so there's my throttle button. If I were to just hit it, it will try and take off. But you'll see me working with this over here, and I'll explain that now. But that's really the throttle button. And you'll see me move this. So that's the first channel, or the first mode, the throttle. That will make it go up, in layman's terms. Make the propeller spin faster. The second is called the yaw, and that's left to right on here, and that will make it yaw. Am I at yaw? Yep, I'm at yaw. That will turn the quadcopter from left or to right, and that's typically called yaw. And there you'll see I turn it left, I turn it right, I turn it left, I turn it right, and I'm doing that with this throttle stick over here. So that's the second thing you can do. The third thing you can do is called pitch, and that's what I explained earlier. If I were to, on the right throttle stick, and on the right throttle stick, the stick over here, if I were to press forward or backwards, it will go forwards or it will go backwards. And then the last one is called your roll. No, what's it called? Yeah, your roll. And that one is left or right. So it will make it pitch left or make it pitch right. Forward, backwards, left or right. And that's the last two, and that's the right hand stick. So typically I'm something like that. So I'm going up, I'm going forwards, backwards, I'm going left and right, left, and I'm landing again. So that's the four modes, or the four basic modes of flying a quadcopter. And just to demonstrate, I will put this in the air, and I'll turn the radio off. And the radio's off. But that's what this quadcopter does. It has some form of fail-safe. It just spins the motors down and it falls from the sky. So that's fail-safe at work there.
What's the range on that one?
This one, probably 100 feet. It's about the maximum you'll get. But you, I mean, again, something like this at 100 feet, you can't even see it. I mean, it's like, you have to fly it FPV if you want to go that far. You have to fly it so you see what is in the camera. So, and that brings us then to the FPV part of it. And so, FPV, the basics. And that's what I showed you a little bit earlier. How does it actually work? So, as you can see, there's a tree, and it goes into this camera over here. So it sees, this camera has a certain view. And then that quadcopter has a little antenna at the back here, 5.8 antenna. And that transmits that signal, or that picture the camera sees, to this antenna over here. And this is then displayed on a little monitor over here. Maybe if I show it to you live like that, you can get a better idea if you want to. I have no idea. There. There's the little monitor. There you are. There's everybody. Yeah, I mean, you've got some idea of what's going on there, right?
Yeah.
So you could fly this pretty far away. I could actually, in actual fact, fly it behind there. I don't have to be behind there because I'm inside here. I physically can be standing over here and I could be flying in the room next here, but I would be looking at this display because I'm looking at the camera. And that's what FPV does. It transmits that little picture from a camera onto my monitor. And that's how we can do search and rescue and that kind of stuff. If there's somebody in these woods, I can take my quadcopter, I can fly over it, I can fly through the woods, while I'm viewing on my monitor I don't have to be there, I can be here, and the quadcopter can be over there. So that's a great advantage, but that's typically how FPV then works. There is a monitor again. Here is goggles, which is the same thing, except goggles are much more immersive. If you put this on, all you see is the picture. It really is all around you, like you're actually there. Where a monitor is, you're going to look at it and somebody talks to you on this side. Yeah, okay. Where with goggles, though, you're absolutely there. It blocks off everything else around you. Which I prefer goggles that over a monitor, but there are lots of people who just can't fly that immersive, and lots of people with get vertigo and all sorts of stuff because you're really there. I mean, this thing is flying around and it's tilting. It's not uncommon for people to fall over while flying because they try and do this and it's too much, so you have to sit down properly and sit down when you fly. Okay. Especially with goggles. With monitors, it's like a video game, right? You're watching a normal TV. So if you start flying FPV, there's a few exercises you can do. You get open field again. You don't want to do this where you can hurt people or property or anything like that. And you get a little friend over here, and it's typically your spotter. The law also talks about a spotter, saying there's always got to be somebody who can look around and tell you there's an aeroplane coming behind you or something like that. I don't know which aeroplanes fly lower than the trees around here, but it's the law. So, so that guy is going to walk in a half moon in front of you, and you're going to basically hover this little quadcopter, and you're going to yaw around, and you're going to follow him, and he's just going to walk in front of you, and you're just going to hang in one spot, and you're going to follow him. And that's the first exercise, and that's going to teach you, first of all, throttle control, how to keep this thing, in the perfect world, if I were to put the throttle over there, it would just hang there. But this is not the perfect world. There's wind and there's all sorts of things happening to this thing. So it's going to start drifting off to a side, and you're going to have to bring it back a little bit. And so, but it's going to teach you that throttle control, and a wind gust is going to take it up, and you're going to have to give less throttle so it comes down. So there's a lot of work in throttle control, so you stay at least at the same height. And then there's, of course, the yaw control. If you were to just bang the stick to the right, it would just spin around and you'd be watching the other side. So yaw control is very important. So that's why the guy's walking slowly in front of you so you can follow him. And then it's going to teach you distance and orientation, because of course the distance you view something, it's like a car's rear view mirror. Objects, appear closer than, it's something very different looking through an object through a camera than it is in real life. So it will teach you that how big is a person in real life looking at it through a camera. So, and it's also going to teach you orientation. Because you only see this much of a view, it's very hard. A human has a lot of peripheral view. On an FPV camera, you're really just looking like this and understanding where you're looking at. So that's the first exercise you can do. The second exercise you can do is have your friend pick out two markers, 200 to 300 feet apart, and have him walk or run between the two markers, and you just follow him, and you turn around and you follow him to the other side, and eventually he can walk away, and you can just fly between these two markers, maybe in a figure of 8, around this way, around that way. So in a figure of 8, you're going to do something like that, and that's going to teach you again throttle control. But it's also going to teach you your yaw as you go around these edges. It's going to teach you your distance and orientation, of course, and it's going to teach you pitch, is how do you pitch it, and your roll, of course, when you go around the corner. So that's typically how you would start. Pick out the open field, get a buddy, let him do these two exercises for you, and you just learn how to fly FPV. Now that's not flying a quadcopter. Flying a quadcopter, you would do what we call line of sight, and that's basically I'm looking at it while flying it, and but I'm not doing FPV. This is specifically for FPV. Once you put your goggles on, you're going to do these two exercises to start off with. It's really the easiest. And that then just brings us into the last piece, and that's FPV Racing. And that's what you see outside there. That's when guys fly in a course like this. Typically there'll be flags, there'll be a start finish, there'll be a gate, meaning it's something about this high, and they have to go under it. Typically inside that gate is tracking, meaning there's sensors in there that tell them, you know, pilot X just went under the gate and the timer will stop. You know, so he goes under the gate, then he has to go around certain flags in a course, and you'll see them across the road here. There's these dots on the ground, so the pilot while flying is looking at the dots to know where the course is going, and he'll go around the flags, and he'll go maybe under another one or two of these I forgot the word, gates. We'll go under another gate maybe, and that's typically, we put the gates there to force them to come down. You know, we don't want them to fly 300 feet in the air, so you force them to come down. If they do not make a gate, they have to come back and do the gate, meaning he gets disqualified if he doesn't go through the gate. And you know, and of course, like it says there, there's 1 to 6 pilots that start off a race, and they fly together, and races start off at the same time, and they're not allowed to miss a flag or a gate, and you must return. So if you miss a gate or a flag, you missed it, you have to come back and do it again. And you know, time is important. Of course, the first guy that can finish this, and they typically fly 3 or 4 laps of those, and the first one who finishes, and time-wise, but in most cases, the guy that actually finishes is the winner, because you know, again, at 65 miles an hour, going around those bends, if you're not really good at it, you're going to crash within the first 12 seconds. So finishing, so lots of guys just, you know, they just ease through it and they win because they actually finished, where the fast guy hit the first gate he could see and destroyed his quad, you know, broke a propeller or whatever. So that's racing. It's very, it's like watching Star Wars. I have my little Star Wars hat over here. You see the pod races. It's really like that. If you have goggles on and you're going at quite a rate of speed around obstacles and trees and stuff, go look on YouTube. You'll see a lot of even my videos there. Let's see. For there you'll see my, oh God, no, you can't see it. You'll see my little fly over there. If you look on YouTube, Fun Fly FPV, you'll see a lot of videos of us flying here in Atlanta. I cover a lot of DRC races. You'll see a lot of local people actually doing this. And so we would love you guys to come out and join the club and be part of that. You know, there's nothing like going through the woods at 40, 50 miles an hour with the trees whizzing past you with little LED lights on the back, and you know, it's just, it's awesome. That's all I can say about it. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking to you about it if I didn't love it and I didn't think this is a great thing. And you know, and with guys like Mad Lab Industries over here that will provide the kits and, you know, sell you all the parts and all of that, that's where you want to go. And you know, I think this technology and the sport as a whole has a whole world ahead of it, and it's just going to be really, really important. And just one other aspect in this is, where is this going in the future? Yes, there's laws coming, but they can't, you know, banning drones is like saying banning guns. It's coming, okay? Drones are coming. It's not going to go away. So, and because of that, there will be jobs in drones. There's a lot of jobs in the military that's going to open for this. You know, at the moment they're trying to get actual airplane pilots to fly this. It's not the same thing. You know, an airplane pilot is not used to flying through a house or around a tree. We can do that with these things. So there's jobs opening for that, and there's going to be a big industry in this in the future. So it's coming big time. So anybody, now's the time to join, and it's a great hobby, and it's an adrenaline hobby, and it can lead to a great future job as well. Okay, so and that's then our first course is really the, oh, sorry, I thought I was on the, what's his name there? That's then our first course, and it really, we have another one starting now, which is more the DIY. We're going to talk more about the specific parts and what they do, much more in depth. So this one was the basic one. I'm sorry if it was a little bit technical, but it was the basic one. Sorry for my messy stuff earlier too. Any questions?
Yeah, what is that model called with the double decker with the green blades?
It's the Mini 250. So it's actually the Grasshopper Mini 250 on our.
Grasshopper Mini 250. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about it and what we're going to talk next. You know, what makes this thing what it is.
You mentioned the range for the Beetle was 100 feet.
Yeah.
I believe, right? So if you're flying with a fancier radio, would it go further, or is it limited by?
No, you see there's two sides to it. There's the radio, but this also has a little receiver inside, and that's really what governs the range, is what's inside here. So with a nice radio, yes, it can sit. This guy can't pick it up that far. So it's unfortunately it's a two-sided thing. It's not just radio. Radio will help, I mean, but it's not going to give you, you know, for a $500 radio, it's not going to make you go 500 feet. It's going to go make you go 120 feet. You know, what's more important is what's inside here, the radio that's in here.
But you'll find with most of those small quads, you're not so limited by the range as you are by what you can discern by looking at it.
Oh yeah, you can see this thing on the other side of the
If that thing
room.
gets far enough away to where range becomes an issue, it will probably happen because of wind, and so you're probably a little disoriented, and having more range isn't going to help you. It's usually going to get you more lost. You start getting out of range,
Yeah.
you're best off putting it down and walking to it.
Yeah,
rather than trying to
no,
see it.
and once you, like he says, if you realize you're in trouble, drop it and go find it, because you don't want to keep flying and then you have no idea. But FPV helps with that, because at least if you do an FPV, you're inside, you can at least see where you are. But it's strange how the same tree looks different from different angles. I mean, it's like, where am I? I know I'm by a tree, but which one? You know, there's 1,000 out there, you know. So a little one like this, I really just fly it inside. You know, don't, if you fly outside, you're brave.
If you start with one of the toys and you get used to the feel of being able to control it, and you go to one of the hobby units, is it like a car where you just hop in another one and you just start driving, or do you still have to kind of get used to the...
Now this is a Beetle and this is a Ferrari. They both have a steering wheel, and they both work exactly the same. The gas pedal is in the same. But if this guy, again, if you hit the gas, you're going to go 65 miles an hour and you're going to go 4. So
Yeah.
there's, you know, but it's the same mechanics. Yeah, it's going to feel different, but there's just so much more power in this guy. But once you understand the basics of flight with this, you can easily master this, because you'll know, you know, you can't just hit the throttle and it's gonna, you know, you have to ease into things and you have to learn. And, you know, how you fly is also important. Lots of people are pinchers, other people's are thumbers. There's a whole world about how you fly and even use a radio, which exists. But typically, yes, it translates directly over, but it's just a much more powerful machine.
So what about the different number of propellers, like the advantages and differences between like the quadcopter versus the hexcopter?
Hex and an octocopter, the reason why, typically why those are, they are more for filming and they give stability. Lots of people say, oh, I can fly an octocopter, that means I can lose a propeller. No, you can't. It's still going to fall from the sky, even one propeller. But it's for stability. It gives the quadcopter, where this guy, there's 4 propellers giving it stability. With the octocopter, there'll be 4 more propellers, and the stability of it would be much, much, much better than with a quadcopter like this. But in racing, typically you want a quadcopter, you only want 4 motors. You're tilting this thing and you're throwing it around corners. you don't care so much about the stability, you know, but if you're taking a high def video of a river, you want it to be as stable and as quiet as possible. So, that's why 6 motors also, those typically spin at much lower speed, so the vibration is less, everything built around more stability and fulfillment. So racers typically will not fly, 6 or 8 propeller, because that's more fulfillment. Any other questions? You good?
Great, thank you.
You got something, hang on.
You said that you typically see racing ones with a lot less propellers?
Yeah, 4.
Would you ever see one racing with a tri?
Yeah, you get tricopters, of course. There's 3 propellers. We have a guy, there's a very well-known guy that lives in Atlanta. His name's simplecopter.com. He has a lot of tricopters out, and he actually races them with us. And yes, tricopters do very well at racing as well. And the main reason why they do very well, the tricopter, as you can imagine, only has 3 propellers, and the back propeller actually swivels, and that gives it a lot better yaw control than a quadcopter. So if he goes into a corner, he can really do a corner much quicker than I can do in a quadcopter. It's just much easier for a tricopter to do that. But he loses stability, and he loses a lot of, lift and that kind of thing, because he's losing a propeller. Okay. Yes?
On the racing one, what's the typical battery life for each race?
A typical racing quadcopter will run for 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. On something like that with a big battery, you would run for 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. So, and that makes it good for filming, this is a race.
Are the batteries expensive for the racing?
It depends on what you buy. A battery can be as little as $10, but then it's typically a low C rated battery, meaning it doesn't put out as much power. Once you get into 80 C batteries and that, they're about $40 a battery. They get very expensive. But then you high rated racing battery. So again, in that you can go up in stages, and I'll talk a little bit about that in our more advanced course now. Okay, everybody good? Any questions there? You good? Okay, give me a minute or two and we'll start the next one. You got anything else you want to say?
I'm gonna head, we got a trailer outside.
I'll mention one thing. He said when you're learning, keep it indoor. If you are tempted to go outdoor, which we all are, this field out here is AstroTurf. That's a great place to crash a quadcopter because it is consistently soft. You go out to most fields and you've got a mixture between if you crash there, you're going to survive, and if you hit that, it's less grass, more dirt, and you don't survive. So if you can find
a nice grassy field typically helps a lot, because you want
tall grass is great as well.
Yep.
But then it's harder to find it.
Oh yeah, you don't want this to drop in tall grass.
Tall grass.